He's becoming a regular guest on the John Frederick Show, Patrick Theros. Mr. Ambassador, great to have you with us, sir.
Great. I really enjoy this show. I'm listening to you as well as talking to you occasionally.
Okay, so that's a lot of fun. Now we not only have a new guest, but a new listener, so we appreciate that, Ambassador Theros. Thank you so much. I want to get to the Gulf because, look, as the ambassador to the state of Qatar, obviously you know everything that's going on there, or certainly did, and you're very much dialed in, and we appreciate that, and your unique and insightful perspective. So this embargo with the state of Qatar and the Gang of Four continues to go on unabated, although I can't figure out what the purpose now of it is. It's backfired, blown up in the Saudis' face. Everything has turned out to be a disaster. If you ever were to write a history book, Mr. Ambassador, that would be called How to Do a Blockade and Have It Fail. This would be the poster child. But now the Saudis are saying, okay, so now we have a new plan. And that's we're going to build this $750 million canal, which is going to take away the land crossing, all the land crossing between Saudi Arabia and Qatar. And so turn it into an island. And like somehow that is going to further isolate the country. And of course, the state of Qatar said, well, we'll just find ways around that like we did everything else you've done. Yeah. But what is the point of this?
I have absolutely no idea. I mean, this is probably the most mystifying part of the policies. First of all, I've been to the border area. There is one border crossing where the Qatari Peninsula comes into Saudi Arabia. There is exactly one border crossing in a small town called Salwa. Mm-hmm. The rest, way back when, the Saudis put up a sand berm. Basically, they took a lot of bulldozers and bulldozed up along the border a sand wall that varies from 10 to 30 feet high all along the entire border. So they've already got a pretty solid block against anybody crossing. Not that anybody, necessarily needs to. The other thing, if you look at a map, you realize that already about a third of the border is part of this inlet called Khor Odeid, which actually, as I say, a third of the border is already water. So, I mean, this borders on the, boy, that was a bad pun, but this borders on the ludicrous. Secondly, I can't figure out the engineering on this thing. There is, if you go down into that area, there is this constant movement of sand from west to east.
Right.
And there are dunes, and not a lot of dunes, but enough. So this thing's going to fill up with sand every couple of years entirely. So unless you build this thing 10 miles wide, you're going to have a constant dredging problem. It also means you're going to have to put the thing on the Saudi side of the border because the Qataris aren't going to permit you to do it right on the border. So the Saudis will be basically cutting themselves off from a small piece of their own territory. Now, this isn't territory it's worth much, so I suppose that doesn't bother them. But sooner or later, I mean, if the Saudis have got this idea that sooner or later they're going to force the Qataris to surrender and to be their vassal state again, then you're going to have to build a bridge across this thing. The currents in the area won't keep the thing clear of silt. So, maybe when they got rid of the Bin Ladens as an engineering company, they should bring them back because the guys are really good engineers. They could tell them that this is no way to build a canal.
When do we stop laughing at this? I mean, it's almost like out of a comic strip. They're saying that the waterway would be 60 kilometers in length and 200 meters wide. As you just said, it would just fill up with sand, so that doesn't make any sense.
That's right.
They say they want it to be big enough, 20 meters deep, so that it will receive container and passenger ships. I don't even know how they would get through it with all the sand. Just the initial cost is $750 million, and that's way underestimated. So it almost seems to me like the Saudis are just like throwing this out there because their blockade, the embargo, has been such an economic catastrophe for them. It's blown up in their face. It's totally backfired. They all have egg on their face. The state of Qatar is better off today than it was before the embargo. They're stronger economically. They've expanded their trade routes. They've expanded their trading partners. They're getting better goods that are cheaper prices. Well, the whole thing has been a disaster for the Saudis, and now they're going to multiply that by trying to turn the state of Qatar into an island, which doesn't make any sense. We're with former ambassador of the state of Qatar, Patrick Theros, who is with us as phones are ringing. I know you're a very busy guy. People probably heard you on my show. They're calling you up right now. They want to know what's going on. So where does this embargo end here? I mean, at what?
There's been an expansion, and it's something a little bit concerning me. If you remember that this whole choreography, the attack on Qatar, the blockade, the announcements, the hacking of Qatar news agency, all was preceded by a rather elaborate panel that was run by this strange little think tank here in Washington called the Federation for Defensive Democracies, the FDD. This is a place where a lot of the old neocons who brought us the Iraq War have taken refuge. And they began with a one-day program attacking Qatar as a supporter of terrorism, and they brought a lot of people up. I think they duped a lot of people into believing this, so they had big panels and so forth. And this happened the day before the hacking and the day before relations were broken. So it was part of the choreography. Mm-hmm. In the last week, the same organization, the FDD, has gone after Oman and now is going after Kuwait. And they've been attacking Oman for failing to live up to its responsibilities in the GCC, for failing to support Saudi Arabia and the Emirates in the fight against terrorism, i.e. the fight against Qatar. And the last few days, they've gone after Kuwait for refusing to follow the Saudi line on what's happening with the peace process, the Palestinian and Israeli peace process. And it's been and these are rather vicious attacks that have been, articles have been written, they've commissioned articles on their website and so forth, attacking Kuwait now. And these are the two countries in the GCC that have tried to stay neutral and have tried to mediate, particularly in Kuwait's case, have tried to mediate the dispute between Saudi Arabia. Now, one of the stories that leaked after the blockade began was that the UAE had been funding the FDD. So I'm wondering, I have no proof, but I am sure wondering, 2 and 2 makes 4, that is the FDD is still getting funding, I presume, from the UAE, and now they're going after Kuwait and Oman. So this has added a whole new development to the problem that I find a little bit scary.
So this is called the Federation of, did you say Defensive?
Federation for the Defense of Democracy.
Federation for the
Foundation, excuse me, not Federation. Foundation for the Defense of Democracy.
All right, let's get this straight. Foundation for the Defense of Democracy. And you're saying that this is basically a new think tank housed by...
It's been around a long time, but it was sort of at the bottom of importance in this town. And all of a sudden they've got new funding. They say that hacking the UAE emails that got reported in the press showed that the UAE had funded the FDD considerably in the lead up to the attack on Qatar, this program against Qatar. And now, as I say, they're leading the charge against Kuwait. And what's very interesting is they're leading the charge against Kuwait in the context of in the context of the Kushner Plan and Saudi Arabia and Israel and so forth. So really strange.
And you're saying that a lot of the makeup now is the neocons in Washington that have been kind of kicked out of the Trump administration, influence there. So now they've kind of taken this organization over. Is that the way I understand it?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, if you look at it, if you look at their sort of their officers and so forth, it's the old guard neocons. The guys, I say, the guys who brought us Iraq.
Right, Iraq and the whole bit. Okay, and so the Foundation for Defensive Democracy, we'll look into that. And we also had. Look, I mean, there's no question that the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, MBS. I mean, the breathtaking and bold fashion, right, that he's consolidating power there,
right,
is counter to the way the Saudis have run that government for a very long time.
Absolutely, yeah.
And they've been able to basically get the Trump administration to look the other way. I mean, all these arrests he made, and now they're seeing reports that they've only really recovered about 10% of the money that they were after. And the Saudi economy is not doing well. So people right? I mean, average Saudis.
Yeah. So why spend $750 million building the silly canal?
It makes no sense. It makes no sense at all. All right, we are with former ambassador of the state of Qatar, Patrick Theros, from Washington, D.C. Now, Mr. Ambassador, I want to get to what we're going to call, what everybody is calling the kind of Jared Kushner, President Trump, the ultimate deal. And it's sort of like triangulation is the way I've presented it various times. It's like Jared Kushner went to the Middle East, he went to the Gulf, and he's trying to get all of the enemies of Iran, right, which would be Saudi Arabia, et cetera, to then embrace a treaty that he would call the ultimate deal, and then I think pressure the Palestinian President Hamas, pressure him to come to the table. And I think what they're thinking of is, look, if we can get Hamas to the table and we can get the Saudis and the Gulf states, the Middle East, Egypt behind this, whatever the peace plan is, it's not leaked out. We don't know what it is. I think then they feel that they can then leverage the Israelis to be a part of it because of all the things they've done for them. How do you think it's going to play out? And has my description of it been somewhat accurate?
All right, it's been about as accurate as any other description. It's like the elephant. There's 7 blind men and the elephant. The guy holding onto the tail thinks it looks like a snake, and the legs he thinks it looks like a tree. So there's contradictory stories. And let me tell you my own personal opinion.
Good.
Speculation, it's informed. I'm just trying to put them together from all the different stories I've heard, some of them from good sources, some of them from not. It appears that it isn't so much a peace plan as it is an attempt to, first of all, reduce the Palestinian resistance so it's no longer important and no longer a diversion for the Israelis, and to pull Saudi Arabia into a relationship with Israel that can then be leveraged to be a coalition against Iran.
Mm-hmm.
So the first part of the plan seems to be a massive economic development program for the West Bank, for the occupied territories, the West Bank and Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
That will so improve the economic situation of the Palestinians that they will find living under the occupation more tolerable than it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And so for this, obviously, you're talking about billions of dollars, and I don't think the administration wants to spend billions of dollars in the West Bank, aside from the fact that they probably couldn't get it out of Congress right now.
Mm-hmm.
So what what it appears is happening, and I have to keep telling you it appears because I don't think anyone knows for 100% sure except the people directly involved. It appears that Mr. Kushner is making the rounds of the region to get them to foot the bill, to get the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Qataris and everybody else to foot the bill for improving, for fixing the economy of the West Bank and Gaza. And this is why, they keep talking about we're going to give them a deal that they have to take or leave. They won't be able to turn down. And I can't think of a political deal that would be acceptable to the Israelis that any Palestinian leader could sign on to without getting killed the next day.
Right.
So I just don't see the parameters of a political deal. Now, here is the second part of what we are seeing, and this is a little bit more direct.
Yes.
Back up. There is an agreement between Jordan and Israel that King Abdullah of Jordan is the custodian of the Muslim and Christian holy places in Palestine, particularly in Jerusalem.
Right.
So the Christian churches, he is the protector of the Christian churches and the Muslim and the various Muslim shrines and holy sites in Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
And this is it was a follow-on agreement to the peace treaty between Jordan and Israel. And there has been a lot of problems for Christians in Israel, in the East Bank, not the East Bank, in East Jerusalem, in the last couple of years, because there are some organizations there that, for political reasons, are trying to grab the lands that belong to the churches. Just a little bit of background. These are churches that have been in Jerusalem since Jesus was there. A missionary once asked a Palestinian friend of mine, said, "Who converted you to Christianity?" And the guy said, "Jesus Christ." This is where Jesus began. So these are 2,000-year-old institutions that are in Jerusalem and in the Holy Land. In those 2,000 years, they've accumulated a huge amount of land, and that land, they rent that land out. Essentially, these churches operate real estate because this is what keeps them going. There are 600 churches and holy sites in and around Jerusalem. They have schools with 50,000 kids in the schools. They have charitable organizations and stuff like that, and all that is financed by the real estate. Well, that real estate is worth billions of dollars.
Right.
And there are some people in the Israeli political world that really like to put their hands on that real estate. And one of the biggest obstacles to doing so has been the fact that King Abdullah is the protector of the holy places. Okay. Now, it seems that the Israelis have suggested to Kushner, or maybe Kushner thought it up on his own, that the Israelis should agree that Saudi Arabia should be the protector of the Muslim and Christian holy places in Jerusalem. And let me tell you, I cannot think of a better way to essentially exterminate Christianity as an institution in the Holy Land, because I cannot imagine that the Saudis would put the same degree of enthusiasm and effort. I mean, King Abdullah has gone out, and his father, King Hussein, went out on the limb over and over again to try and stop these things. They've spent a lot of their political capital trying to protect both churches and the Muslim institutions. And I simply don't see the Saudis doing this. But what it is a great incentive to the Saudis, because it would truly make them the leaders of the Muslim world, because they're the custodians of the holy places in Mecca, in Medina, which are the first and second most important cities in the Muslim world, and in Jerusalem, which is the third most important city.
Right.
So at that point, the Saudis, so this is, I think, a tremendous incentive to the Saudis, because politically it would be revolutionary. Every major holy city, the three major cities that are holy to Muslims in the world would then all be under the holy places would be under the custodianship of the King of Saudi Arabia.
Under the purview of the Saudis, but this would be a bad deal for Christians in Israel.
Christians. Right. I mean,
horrible deal.
The Muslims, it wouldn't affect them very much. It'd probably even help the Muslims a little bit. But the Christians, I mean, there are no Christian churches. There's no Christian activity in Saudi Arabia. The idea that even the Saudis would understand what the issues are, even if they were well-intentioned, they have no idea what the issues are.
Right. Nor do they have
potentially catastrophic for the Christians, because without that land, these churches are all going to close.
Right. They're all gone. Right. And then they're going to get sold for billions of dollars. So I've only got a little over a minute, but really, if you get to this Kushner plan, the ultimate deal, as they're calling it, we're not talking about a two-state solution. We're talking about a peaceful resolution where the Palestinians can live there in peace and they get along, and there's jobs and there's economic prosperity, rather than have some kind of a two-state solution. But there's so many obstacles to that.
Well, the first obstacle is that there is a very large part of the Israeli political spectrum doesn't want this to happen, because this is not necessarily the majority of Israelis, but there are certain extremist political parties in Israel whose intent is to rid all of the land of Israel of of the Palestinians.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going to be the first obstacle to it happening. And secondly, is the Israelis are so deeply entrenched in the West Bank and have got so many security controls that the thing holding the West Bank back now economically and Gaza is the intensity and the ubiquity of Israeli security all over the place. So goods can't travel, people can't travel, can't get to their jobs, they can't get around. So in order to make this work, you'd have to lift the Israeli security apparatus in the West Bank and around Gaza. And I don't know how they're going to do that.
There's a lot of obstacles to this. I mean, I kind of get what Kushner's trying to do, and it's on paper, you can draw a line to get there, but as you said, the political reality of doing it is very, very slim. We'll see how it plays out. But I definitely agree with you that putting these churches, taking them from King Abdullah in Jordan and giving them to the purview of the Saudis is a very bad deal for Christians in the state of Israel. Patrick Theros, we're out of time. Great analysis. Really appreciate your in-depth perspective. We've been chatting with the former ambassador of the state of Qatar, Patrick Theros.
I really enjoyed this. Thank you.